So what we're going to be speaking about this evening is the series that I was asked to talk about called the Inner Harmony series, just some insights and lessons learned about this as I've gone through this body of work and how it's evolved. You'll notice that I'll be showing some images, and each time you see one like this, where it has a title and then a country and a date, those are images that are obviously within the series, though there will be some others during the presentation that are also part of the series, but just to give you a little heads up on that. So again, first, just my gratitude to Sandy and the whole group for this opportunity to be with you this evening. So I'm going to be sharing some personal experiences, but one of the things that I'd really like to emphasize is that I'm really not an authority on anything. We all have our perspective, we all have our way of doing things, and I'm just sharing some of the things that have kind of resonated with me over the years, and hopefully some of it will be at least little tidbits here and there might be of some value as you navigate through your journey as a photographer, as an artist, and whatnot. So I'd really, again, like to emphasize that everyone needs to find their own path. And my time with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, he frequently talks about this, that everybody needs to find their own path. There's not just one way to go, whether it's about a photographic body of work or really anything else in life. So first, I'd like to just kind of clarify what I mean by a series of a body of work. What I'm really talking about is a singular body of work, a collection of a significant number of pieces that are cohesive in nature and have a defined theme. Arbitrarily, I'm just throwing out the idea of 16 to 20 images as a minimum for what I might consider and what most people might consider a body of work, but obviously that's up to conversation. The sorts of things that we'll be speaking about, touching on this evening. First, I'd like to talk about what's the series all about? I mean, why did I do that? Why did I do this? And then how it came about. I'd like to show some sample photographs from the series. I'll show about 20 of them, keeping in line with what we were talking about a series. I'd also like to take you on one of my adventures in the Himalayas up to 15,000 feet. So you get kind of a taste of some of the trips that I go on, the experiences that I have when I'm taking these photographs. Also, I'd like to touch on some exhibition experiences, both here in the US and internationally, because I know that when people are putting together a project, sometimes they have an idea of, well, gee, can I exhibit this somewhere? Or, you know, what are the logistics of it? What are some of the challenges, et cetera, et cetera? Obviously, I won't be going through all the details, but hopefully at the end, if people have specific things they'd like to have a conversation about related to logistics or whatever else, I'm more than happy to dialogue with you on that. Some of the things that I've done related to teaching and presentations, just some PR, how to get the word out about your work, and then a couple of books that I've published. So, Gesundheit to whomever. First objective. What's the objective of the Inner Harmony series? It's to use photography to explore universally relevant principles central to living a less stressful, more balanced life, regardless of one's spiritual beliefs. I think it's really important for me to have a clear idea of why I'm doing something. It helps motivate me and keep me focused. That being said, I would also like to emphasize that for me anyway, part of the creative process and part of the process of creating a photographic project is a balancing act between staying focused on what it is that's my objective while not putting blinders on, which makes it so that it restricts me and not being able to expand the project and being not so wed to the idea that I lose sight of other opportunities to grow and get more quality out of what it is that I'm doing. So also this particular project is as viewed from an Eastern tradition. So, and I'll explain why, how that came about in a bit. The photographs are intimate photographs of Buddhists that I've taken during 17 extended stays in 10 countries throughout Asia, so far over 13 years, and I actually head back to India in 2 weeks. So you can see on the map here to the right, some of the countries that I've been to in different provinces. I've been to India 5 times, and this will be my 6th coming up. My favorite country in the world is Bhutan, where I've been 5 times, but also 3 times in Vietnam, a couple times in China, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not married to a specific geographic location. And I want to emphasize that because what I'm going to be talking about is not about a particular geographic location or particular trip, but a way of thinking. And that's what the project is all about, a way of thinking that may be beneficial to us in the West, who maybe have not had as much exposure to some of the things that go on in the East. Everyone always wants to know, what equipment do you use? Well, I'm extremely basic. I use one camera, one lens, usually a zoom anywhere from 24 to 70 or a 24 to a 110. I've used a Sony, I've used a Canon. It really hasn't made a whole heck of a lot of difference. I use just a UV filter. I do everything manual settings, handheld. I'm schlepping up to, in the Himalayas, to 15,000 feet. I'm not carrying a lot of equipment or a tripod or anything else. I also use natural light in many of the places where I photograph. It's really intrusive, first of all, to use a flash. And secondly, I just don't feel as comfortable with that. I don't want to impede or impose myself on what's going on. I'd rather be a fly on the wall. And none of the images are staged. Everything is natural. And that happens because when I'm in these environments, I'm immersed for extended periods of times, oftentimes living in a particular community and or in a monastery for a number of days. And after a while, I'm kind of in the background and nobody really knows that I exist. One of the reasons I'm able to do that is this is the way I'm always dressed, very monochromatic. I don't try to draw any attention to myself. As you'll notice, my camera is not slung over my neck, and the lens of the camera is tucked underneath my elbow, so the lens is facing away from everyone, so it's not intimidating. So my camera also looks smaller. Frequently, when I go to an area, my camera is in a backpack. It doesn't even come out at the beginning. No one even has any idea that I even know what a camera looks like. So let me just walk you through how the series really came about. As Sandy mentioned, I've done some international humanitarian work, 20 years worth, through Health Volunteers Overseas, whose national headquarters is in Washington, D.C. One medical professional at a time is invited into a teaching setting in a hospital in an under-resourced country. And I'm typically there from anywhere from 2 weeks to a month, embedded into their system. My specialty is helping people with problems from the tip of the finger to just above the elbow. So whether that's sewing back on a hand after it's been cut off, or patting someone on the back and saying, you'll be okay, it's the whole gamut. But when I'm going, again, I'm immersed and I'm not interfering with their daily routine because it's not like a big team going in there working. And I go back frequently to the same location year after year. They know that I'm a volunteer. They know I'm doing it at my own expense. They know the reasoning why I'm there. There's no hidden agenda. So as a result, when I go, they open their doors to me frequently and really want to show me their community, are very proud of their area, etc. And I do just a lot of listening. I don't do a whole lot of talking. So one of those trips through Health Volunteers Overseas in 2012 was to Wenzhou, China. And when I went there, I did a little research online because I was already photographing, and I had begun doing photographs in Asia back in 1998 with my first trip to Asia, which was in Vietnam, and I was there 3 times in Vietnam. So I already had a taste of Asia. I'd been there already a number of times and was really just intrigued by the mindset of many of the people that I met and the culture. I don't want to generalize, but that was just a general feeling that I had. So before I went to China, they knew also that I photograph, and they knew something about me. So when I went, this is what the city looks like. It's 9 million inhabitants, very progressive city. And one of the doctors that was there who I became very close friends with was Dr. Haiti. This is him with his wife and two children. We've kept in touch for years. I've helped him with articles, publishing articles. We've done a lot of things together. But what he did was he made one of the places I'd heard about on just a blog was this place called the Taiping Temple. And it's a nunnery in the outskirts of the city. And I really knew nothing about it. But he invited me to give a presentation to the photography club of Wenzhou, China. So I was giving a presentation one night early on and when I first got there. And I had mentioned this Taiping Temple. Well, someone in the back raises their hand and says, well, gee, you know, I'm a volunteer there. Would you like to meet the abbess? The abbess is the head of the nunnery. The nunnery has about maybe 60 nuns, about 3 or 4 acres is their nunnery. So I said, sure. So she gets on the phone. There I am the next morning at 6:30 in the morning, meeting the abbess, who doesn't speak any English. And the members of the photography club immediately bring out their cameras. They're showing her all about photography and what they do and everything else. Meanwhile, I had my camera in my backpack. I sat down on the floor in a corner and was just very, very quiet. Eventually, she came over. Traditionally, as they do, she poured me some tea and offered me some sunflower seeds. And then very calmly and through her interpreter, just wanted to learn a little bit about me. So we just had a conversation. And when she knew a little bit about what I was about and the volunteer work and whatnot, I said, thank you very much for letting me come. Would you mind if I take a photograph of the sunflower seeds and of you pouring the tea? She said, no problem. So I took these 2 photographs, and then she allowed me to take that one photograph of her. I left, and a couple days later, I get a call from her interpreter. The abbess would love to see some examples of photographs that you've taken in the past. So I got out a thumb drive, put some from my computer onto a thumb drive after getting off of work that evening, and it I hailed a taxi, got on over there, dropped off a thumb drive. A couple of days later, I get a call. Well, the abbess has looked at your work. We're having a special ceremony this evening. If you stay in the back of the hall, no flash, no photographs of anyone's faces, you are welcome to come and photograph during our ceremony. Of course, I was astounded. I thanked her very much. That evening I went, and this is one of the photographs I saw. It's a towering space with the beams of light coming down from windows above, incense in the air. This is a statue of the female Buddha, and just this expansive space. And it just touched me. It just touched me to the core, because what it reminded me of was my first trip to Vietnam back 14 years before that, where with one of my hosts, I was taken to this place called Marble Mountain, and we climbed down this ladder. This is in my book that I published. It just came out this last year. We climbed down into this dark cave on this ladder, and lo and behold, at the bottom was this towering statue of the female Buddha carved into the side, and lo and behold, this beam of light coming down from above where there was a break in the ceiling to the outside world, shining down on this small temple. So I connected the dots from way back when I had started working in Asia to this new experience. And, it dawned on me this calmness that I felt in that environment and the culture and a variety of other things I can get into later. And right then and there, I decided, I'm going to try to capture a little of this with my camera so that I can try and communicate this sense of calm and sense of we're all in this together, we're all one, we're all interconnected, and share that with the West. So that's when I decided to start this series, Inner Harmony, and I came up with that aim. So that evening, I took this photograph and a few more. A couple of days later, I get another call from the abbess's assistant. Sure enough, would you mind sharing some of the photographs that you took? Absolutely happy to. Put them on a thumb drive, drove over in a taxi that evening, dropped them off. A couple of days later, get another call. The abbess says you can come and you can photograph anywhere in the nunnery that you want, other than the private quarters. You may photograph people's faces. You have carte blanche. All you have to do is, if there's any photograph that someone says, please don't take my photograph or please delete it, by all means, I would do that. They have full access to the photographs for use, for promoting whatever they want to promote at no cost. And that I would not take advantage of the situation. So I went back when I would get off of work on weekends, did this again the following year. And here's some of the photographs that I took. Just a couple more. So I really didn't have any idea where this was going to take me. And in the Buddhist tradition, it's really important to be realistic and have no expectations of where it might take you. So I really didn't have any idea where this was all going to go over the years, really no concept whatsoever. It's just something that spoke to me and excited me. And I decided I'm going to see where this will take me. So it just so happened that I was invited to do an exhibition at Emory University of another series called Seeking Wisdom. This is one of the photographs from that. This is in 2014. I'm suddenly getting an echo. This was in 2014 that I had the exhibition. So a year after my second trip to China. And while I was there, they have what's kind of like a TED Talk. They call it a creativity conversation. And they asked me to come and talk about this Seeking Wisdom series and about life balance. So they wanted the head of the Emory Tibet Studies program to interview me. This is on my website, actually. That's Dr. Tara Doyle. She and I became friends. And she said, John, every spring I bring a group of Emory students to Dharamsala, India, where the Dalai Lama's world headquarters is, for a spring semester. And you have a background that's somewhat unique, and also are a trained integrative medicine health coach through the Duke program. Would you be interested in coming over for 6 weeks and mentoring the students? Well, I said, well, there's the Tibet hospital there. And if I can do some teaching there also at the hospital, then I'd be happy and honored to go. So what that led to was an introduction to a circle of people that I never would have imagined I would have gotten introduced to, which I'll talk about later. And when I went back that spring of 2015, then I started photographing in India. So this is one of the photographs that I took. What I'll do now is show you in sequence 20 photographs from the Inner Harmony series. You'll notice they're from different countries, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd like you to just make note a little bit about the sequencing of the images, because this is also kind of the approach that I use frequently, depending on what kind of exhibition that the work might be in. So let me just run through a few of these for you. This is the Dalai Lama greeting a crowd as he's coming in. I'm up on stage. I have a press pass, and I'm up there with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and a delegation from the U.S. Senate. That's a whole other story. So that's kind of a series and a sequencing of images. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but just I hope you get the sense that, number one, the tonality is similar in all of them. I'm using the same basic uh, process, shadowing, everything else. They're all black and white. They're all relatively close up. I'm going from some horizontal to some square to some vertical, mixing it up. It's not close-ups of monks' faces all at the same time. I'm trying to jump around to some different ideas, keeping the interest going. So what I'd like to do now is kind of bring you through one of my many adventures. This is, I just call this Temple in the Clouds. So this is one of my trips in Bhutan. And when I'm in Bhutan, because I'm not going in as a tourist, because I'm invited in by the government, I don't require having a guide, but anyone else who comes in as a tourist has to have a guide with them all the time. And I'm also able to go to some places that people aren't allowed to go to. On this particular trip, though, I was going up to 15,000 feet to this remote temple where there was only a one caretaker, and the temple was over 100, 200 years old, and I didn't know the way. So on this particular trip, I was with a guide. This is Bhutan. It's along the Himalayas. Nepal, I usually fly into Delhi, and then from there I fly from west to east. I'll show you a picture about that in a minute. When I'm going to India in 2 weeks, I'll be in Sikkim, which is up here. It's part of India, an autonomous area. Actually, the Princess of Sikkim lives in Baltimore County, and I was just with her and her husband for 9.5 hours. 3 weeks ago, they were generous enough to invite me to their estate. So, but that's a whole other conversation. So this is flying past Mount Everest over here, and on your way, you always want to request a seat on the left side of the plane when you're going from Delhi to Bhutan. This is flying, and this is the capital of Bhutan. This is Thimphu. The hospital where I work is down here. This is at about 8,000 feet. And I'll be, as I said, going up much higher. You always want to acclimate yourself to the altitude before ever considering going up higher, particularly when you're even starting out at 8,000 feet. This is on the way hiking up. These are prayer flags, clusters of white prayer flags that indicate where a person who has died is being memorialized. This is going up the kind of path that I would go up. I usually use walking sticks. You always want to be careful to understand the traditions and be respectful. When you're going around a stupa, which has holy relics, you always go around in a clockwise direction. So again, that's a whole other conversation about being respectful when photographing in other cultural settings. This is my favorite place in the world. This is the Fagitting Monastery. This in the book that I just mentioned previously. There's only one chapter that's devoted to a specific geographic location, and it's dedicated to Fagitting Monastery. You can read about that in the book, but I usually spend overnight. I'm good friends with the Lama there, and he's kind enough to share his personal quarters right here with me. You can read about why that's crucial when you're up in that area. This is going up to the summit. The prayer flags, you never want to step over the prayer flags, always go under them. You can see I'm up in the clouds by now. We're getting pretty tired. There's up at another stupa, and we're at the temperature is dropping. We're not exactly sure where we are. We're hoping we're getting close, my guide and myself. And fortunately, we then see these prayer flags up at the summit. It was our indication that we were getting close to this remote little temple with its one caregiver. Here's the caregiver who had been there for 12 or 13 years. This is what it looks like on the inside. This is a prayer wheel, and you can see how old this prayer wheel looks. You can see how cold it is. This is the mist from his breath. And his tradition, what we first did was warm up by our only source of heat, which was the wood that he had in the fire. And he was also very graciously cooking us a meal. What they do traditionally is pour you hot milk tea. Again, that's a whole other conversation about the culture around serving tea. And this is called doma, which is this gooey, yucky substance that's over here and over here. And they wrap it in this like in a coca leaf. And it's like caffeine on steroids, and they put it in their mouth. They chew it like a wad in the corner of their mouth. I politely declined the invitation to partake, but this is sitting down for our evening meal. It was time to bed down. It was very, very cold. He was kind enough to let us sleep in the altar room. And this is my exhausted guide. We were each given one of these mattresses to sleep on. So we were really very blessed to have a 3/4 of an inch mattress to sleep on the hard, cold floor. So that really helped us. It was very, very cold that night. Next morning when I woke up, it was complete silence. And when I walked out, I could see, because we came in the middle of the night when it was very dark. This is what I saw when I walked out. A far off ridge engulfed in the clouds, and there was snow on the ground. It had snowed that night. Gorgeous, gorgeous. I'll never forget it. That morning, he went through his rituals of prayer. This is some of the implements. And then as it was getting late in the day, and we had to hike all the way down from 15,000 feet, which is about a little over halfway up Mount Everest is the altitude that we were at. We needed to get down to Thimphu because I needed to work the next day. He said he knew the yak trail that we could go down. So we hiked along the ridge, and we started down where he thought the yak trail would be, going through the forest. No yak trail. Couldn't find it, couldn't find the yak trail. So this is what we headed down, stumbling all the way. Fortunately, we made it through. And when we got down through the end of the forest, we came upon the yak herders encampment. This is one of the very nice ladies that was there and allowed me to photograph this young boy. I'm assuming it was her son, but I'm not sure, who was in one of the tents. And this is what a yak looks like. And what I know from experience working in the hospital is that you do not want to be gored by a yak. So this curly haired gentleman was right there greeting us. And as a diehard photographer, what do I do when they start shooing the yaks down the hill toward me? I pull out my camera and start photographing. So here the yaks coming directly toward me, horns facing me, and I'm there with my camera like a total idiot photographing them. So you see this one over here, I'm assuming it went by my left side. The other one, curly haired one, went by my right side. So I lived to tell the tale somehow. So let's move on a little bit to exhibitions, selecting how to print work, selecting the images. creating the work, what paper to use, sequencing of the images, et cetera, et cetera. We really don't have time to go through all that, though I'm happy to field questions, and maybe we can talk about that at another time. There's also the logistics of framing and keeping the cost down, and who's helping subsidize, or is anybody subsidizing? And if you're traveling out of Baltimore, how do you get things there? How do you maximize if a mat board is 40 by 32, how do you get 4 pieces worth out of it for framed pieces? You got to also remember, though, that if you're using plexiglass, the plexiglass sheets come 4 feet by 8 feet usually, and the thickness of the blade is such that you can't get the full thickness when you cut it. So you have to take that in consideration when you're making your frames. Otherwise, you've got a big whoops, and you've have expensive material, whether it's glass or plexiglass, that you're wasting part of it. So I always try to be really, really careful, depending on how many images I'm going to need, to figure out how I can maximize the whole process and streamline it. So here's an example. I've done a number of solo exhibitions of this particular body of work in the US, starting back in 2013. Yeah, some of them, as you can see, are in North Carolina, close to where I was living. Others are all over the place, though. And it gets even more difficult when you're going overseas. So when I mentioned before about this incredible opportunity to be with the Emory students in Dharamsala, and what that ended up happening was I started to get introduced to the Dalai Lama's inner circle. And when they saw the work that I was doing, they decided that it was important to sponsor exhibitions of my work in India. So the Dalai Lama Foundation partnered with the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives to do one exhibition in Dharamsala, and that's the Chief Oracle of Tibet, which is a whole other story, who I was honored to meet. He did the ribbon cutting ceremony, and then the foundation partnered with the India International Center in Delhi to do another exhibition there. But getting work over there and how to frame it is a real challenge. I was actually able to get all of the artwork for an entire exhibition into one suitcase. Then I was able to, because of my work in Bhutan, the Indian Embassy then did another exhibition. You can see this time the work is done a different way. I decided to try myself to make silk scrolls so that I could roll them up, because I wasn't fully happy with the way I had to present the work in India. So I was able to, again, roll all these up as scrolls and put the entire exhibition into one suitcase. And I just had to teach myself how to make the scrolls. Whole other set of circumstances is at museums. So this is St. Louis University Museum of Art. And what they asked me to do is to do an exhibition in 5 rooms, a 5-room exhibition. So because of the layout and everything, I'm thinking, okay, I need to come up with themes specifically that go along with Buddhist concepts of how we achieve enlightenment, how do we achieve inner harmony. And they have to go in order so that everything goes in a clockwise direction, like I was talking about before. So the first room would be the room of compassion, then the next room, healing, wisdom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the way we set up the exhibition. So as an example, in the compassion room, which is this first room that we see over here, I came up with the idea of having sayings, poetry, and actions related to the concept of compassion. So that whole room and the color theme was all related to compassion. Then another room was related to wisdom. A Buddhist theme for wisdom is the color white. So we went on with those color themes in the different rooms. So that's really how we did it. A whole different set of circumstances is the exhibition that's now on at the American Visionary Art Museum in Baltimore. It's the Healing and the Art of Compassion exhibition. And that's a whole other story. So as many of you know, the founding director of the museum is Rebecca Hofberger. And she wanted to put together this exhibition on compassion. And I didn't ask, but she, and again, look at the colors I'm wearing. Same thing, no matter where I go. That's pretty much my my mantra of how I dress. But these are some of the photographs. And what I did was I asked her what she wanted, and she said, show me ones that are specifically related to compassion. I showed her like about 30 or so. She picked out the ones that they wanted. The other exhibitions that I've done, you notice that the other ones were scrolls. So in order to do that, I needed Palladium Prints. I couldn't do it on regular paper. That was not going to work. I couldn't put anything over the top like glass or plexiglass. I knew they were going to be exposed. So I learned how to do Palladium Prints, which are much, much more durable. You can roll them up much more easily. So that's, and I really love the texture of a Palladium print, which, as many of you know, the chemicals are absorbed into the 100% cotton paper. So it's extremely archival. I love the textural depth to the imagery, the warm color, as opposed to platinum, which is a much darker, harsher black. So that's why I went with Palladium Prints. So how this exhibition that Rebecca put together came about is a whole other story that we could get into another time. But you'll understand the theme of how it came about in just a minute, because another exhibition that I'm involved in was put together by the Shades of Compassion Foundation, which is separate. That's a traveling photography exhibition that is going to museums throughout North America, promoting compassion worldwide. This exhibition is getting started. It's probably going to have its first showing. It's going to be on exhibition for 5 to 10 years. And it has a couple of my pieces of work in the exhibition, but the first showing will probably be the end of May. I can't tell you where yet, but it has 50 pieces from some of the world's leading photographers: Ansel Adams, Imogene Cunningham, Nick Brand, Beth Moon, Joyce Tennyson, the list goes on, but also representation from all over the world. And the exhibition has a strong educational component to it, which was extremely important to me. That was put together by educators from MoMA, Minneapolis Institute of Art, the Center for Compassion Integrity Training for children and adults and whatnot. If you want to learn more about it, just go to the shadesofcompassion.org website, or you can contact us and you can learn more about the exhibition that's going throughout North America. So one other way that I've more recently worked on presenting the images that I think resonates for me, these are Thangka paintings. This is a traditional way in Tibetan forms of Buddhism to show artwork. And Thangka paintings have a religious significance, which we don't have time to get into now, but I was able to connect with the person in Bhutan who makes the Thangkas. He doesn't do the painting, but when the Thangka painting is given to him, he does the tailoring work for the king of Bhutan. So I brought some of my Palladium prints to Bhutan, and he started making Thangkas out of the Palladium prints. So this is one of those one-of-a-kind Thangka paintings that now hangs in my home. But I have him making, he's already made a number of other Thangka paintings using my artwork for exhibitions that I'll actually be picking up some of them when I'm in India, because I'll be meeting with some of my friends from Bhutan. So just another way of doing it. As I mentioned before with the Shades of Compassion exhibition, education is extremely important to me, and I wouldn't be doing the artwork if there wasn't also an opportunity for a springboard for conversation. So I've been able to do presentations around the world on topics related to life balance, inner harmony, seeking wisdom, even for medical groups. This was a keynote address for the National Association for Hand Therapists on seeking balance in our lives and improving patient care. Finding time for photographers, a workshop for main media workshops. Again, for people that are in photography, but are trying to balance their lives, how do you go about it? This is a presentation I recently gave at main media workshops and also at American Visionary Art Museum in Baltimore on being respectful when photographing in unique and unfamiliar cultural settings. I think I'm actually scheduled to do this for the Maryland Photography Association group, for your group. It was supposed to be next month, but then I was able to plan the trip to India. So we've postponed it for a few months, but that's going to be coming up. And again, you can see my same garb. This is the way I dress pretty much all the time. One way of getting your photographs and your work out there, if you're working on a project, is to enter them in international photography competitions. Some of the more prestigious ones, will have it where you can either enter an individual photograph or a group of up to like 10 photographs. Not as many people submit to the series. So you actually have maybe a better chance of getting your photographs recognized if you submit a series of photographs rather than just an individual photograph. And a lot of times if you do a series, you can do a series in multiple genres, and your body of work may fit in more than one genre. So you get the opportunity to submit your series in more than one genre and increase your chance of getting recognized. So what I've done over the last, just in the last 3 years, I've entered Inner Harmony as a series to the major international photography awards. And surprisingly, it's won over 20 international awards, the series. So that's one way that you might want to get your work out there. Another way is to try and match your body of work to a magazine that you know about. So this particular body of work seems to fit very well with Lenswork magazine, who many of you may know. It's been around for over 20 years. It's very, very specific. They tend to do these portfolios, and they only allow portfolios if there are at least 30 or 40 images. Otherwise, they won't do it. So you have a bet if you put together a really substantial body of work and it's of a topic that's not like in your face sort of thing, if you go back and look at the kind of work that they exhibit or that they print, you'll see that this particular body of work, in your harmony, in this case, might go along very well with it. So I entered it in 2014 when I had just basically started the series, and was shocked that they immediately accepted it. It was in their next publication. Usually it takes a year or two, even if they accept it, to get in. So I did that, and then I waited a number of years and said, well, this series has really grown. What the heck? I'm going to submit it one more time. I did it in 2018. Again, it was immediately accepted. It was published immediately in that next issue. So this ended up being part 2 of the series. So keep that in mind if you want to get your work, out there. Another way you might want to go is my first attempt at a self-published limited edition book. This was very expensive to do. It cost me easily $175 per piece. It was a learning process. These are silk covers. I hand sewed the bindings, and I sold these. People can, I still have a couple of copies left, but I sold these back in 2014. So let me bring you forward. This is the last thing I'll be talking about is will be my new book that just came out this year, this past year, 2021, called Inner Harmony, Living in Balance. So there's a real story behind this and why I decided to do this, because I really had not wanted to do a book, even though I've been working on this at the time for like 13 years on this series. But I was honored to have my first private audience with the Dalai Lama in 2017. This happened partly because of his foundation's work with me. And then somehow I became known as someone that was somehow connected with his inner circle, which is really a stretch. But I was asked to lead a delegation to bring the Dalai Lama to our city of Raleigh, North Carolina, and went over with Mayor McFarland and had a private audience with His Holiness. And he accepted the invitation, was actually scheduled to come later that year in 2017. We had raised over $1 million, 19 subcommittees. He was all set to go, and then he canceled all his trips to the US, which I can't get into. But basically, he's considered the reincarnated Buddha of compassion. And when I sat there with him, we held hands for quite a while. We were there together for about 45 minutes. And he knew something about my background. They check out everybody before they'll let him meet with His Holiness, and checked out the mayor. And he said that I can't promote compassion by myself, and would you partner with me in this effort? And the mayor and I accepted the invitation. Well, things were going along smoothly, I thought, very hunky-dory, and at the time. So I decided I was going to present him with a copy of my book, one of the few I had left from 2014, because you always exchange gifts. That's the traditional thing whenever you're invited by any Tibetan to their home or anywhere else. So I shared with him the book. This is the book. And what does he say to me? He calls me Dr. John. He says, no, Dr. John, you can't call it Inner Harmony, Living in Balance, which is what the title is that I had on the book before, Living in Balance. He said, you can't do that. He said, because everybody's going to think you want to convert them to Buddhism. I said, and that was not my intention at all. He said, you can't name it that. So because of his comments, despite what my faux pas, he and the mayor and he exchanged gifts. And this is what the mayor and I received from His Holiness. So I still hadn't thought about doing a book, but I knew that if I was going to be doing a book, it wasn't going to be called Inner Harmony, Learning from the Buddha Spirit. So somehow the stars may have aligned, but I was contacted by someone who was involved in printing Ansel Adams' one of his most successful books, Yosemite and the Range of Light. And this person said, we've seen your work and we think you should publish a book. And of course, I didn't believe anything he said until he introduced me to Lance Heide, who is an incredible book designer who had helped design 14 of Ansel Adams' books. So Lance took me under his arm and said, we need to do this. And I would love to help you design the book. And if you want, I'll even be your agent. So we put all this together. He has his process. I flew to Boston. We went through this whole process, which is a whole other story. We put together this proposal and showed it to 10 of the world's leading book publishers of fine art photography books. And lo and behold, Toulouse out of Germany decided they wanted to do it. So I was shocked. And I have a dear friend who's a poet, an educator, a Buddhist scholar, a professor who agreed to do the poetry in the book and to also help write some of the prose in the book. And we were shocked when His Holiness agreed to write a foreword to the book, and also the Queen Mother of Bhutan. So we produced the book in 2021. It's hardcover, bilingual, English and German. It's a good sized book. And it just came out in September of this last year. It was dedicated to all the people throughout Asia that I've been honored to be engaged with over the last 23 years. As I said, each chapter is actually one of the building blocks of how do we achieve inner harmony and enlightenment. That's what the book is all about. So it's a really unusual way of putting together a book. So each chapter is part of those building blocks of how to build that. As you can see, this is kind of the layout. The front of the beginning of each chapter has an image on the left and some commentary on the right, where first there's the poem done by Dr. Paula Arai, and then usually one of my experiences and how it relates to the concept of inner harmony, or in this particular chapter, this chapter is on compassion for animals. And then the layout, we really worked hard on the layout. So there's a rhythm to the imagery. And as you can see here, I've used the hood of a monk or a nun on the left side, and the image of the individual is a shadow, and it's dark with light all around it. And then the larger image on the right is just the opposite. One's horizontal, one's vertical. Each image also has the English title, where it was photographed. In this area is a disputed area in northern India, Ladakh, the country, the year, and whenever I have any commentary, there's this bold print of what the words are in reincarnation. And then in the back is a glossary. So this is the key that tells you to go to the glossary, where it explains what each of those terms is about. Toulouse is also very well known for using color photographs in their books. So they asked if I would be willing to also include some color photographs. So I was able to go back and pull out about 20 photographs that I felt comfortable about that had a similar kind of a palette and a feel of the black and white photographs. So in the book, we've also included some of them. So then here is the glossary in the back. One other way you can get your work recognized, and maybe on a national or an international scale, is occasionally some of these major photography competitions will also include a book competition. And they'll have a professional category that you can submit to, and they have criteria for what's a professional category, and they'll also have the amateur category. And once again, they'll have different genres. So if you have a book, you can submit the book to those competitions. When I enter the competitions, I always do it as a professional. God knows why anybody would consider me a professional, but I do that anyway. So I entered the book in 2021 to these competitions. It's the first time I ever had a book that I would even consider entering into the competition. And I was shocked when it won the gold medal, one of the gold medals for best book by a professional in the people category at the Tokyo International Photo Awards. I then found out it also won a silver medal at the International Photography Awards. That's the one that's held at Carnegie Hall in New York City. And then I just found out last night, by coincidence, I didn't even know this, it happened months ago, that it also won a gold medal for best book by a professional at the PX3, if people are familiar with that. That's the photography festival for Europe that's held in Paris. So the book, if anyone's interested, you may or may not be, but we'd be honored if you would be interested in purchasing one or more copies. You can just go to my website, kolkinphotography.com, and you can get them different amounts. And if you do it that way, you can get signed copies. This is the pricing. It also includes, I made sure to include it, both shipping and handling and taxes. And if you do that, 100% of the proceeds are donated to compassion-centered nonprofits worldwide. And actually, in this case, they go to two. One that empowers disadvantaged women, and the second that teaches compassion to children through the social emotional ethical learning curriculum that's for free and worldwide for children. If you're not interested in any of that, you can also get unsigned copies through major booksellers. The list price is $55. I don't know how much they're selling them for these days. If you want, you're welcome to get a hold of me at any time through my website, again, kolkinphotography.com. You're welcome inquiries about the book, or if you just want to, have a conversation. Maybe you're working on a project and you just want to bounce some ideas off of me. I don't charge for that. And also, if you want me to speak with some other groups, I don't charge. If people want to donate some money to the Shades of Compassion Foundation, that's perfectly fine, but it's not required. So don't hesitate to reach out with me. I'm usually pretty good about that. So with that, I'm just say thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation with you. We've been able to keep it at just under an hour. I kept my promise so that we'll actually have about half hour or whatever. People want to stay around longer or have conversations later, that's perfectly fine. And again, you can contact me at any time through kolkinphotography.com or kolkinphotography@gmail.com. Just contact me directly through my email address is perfectly fine. So with that, Sandra, the maitre d' of this whole thing, if you want to kind of open it up to conversations, questions, whatever works for the group, I'm more than happy to do that. And I'll stop my screen share, and yeah.
Oh my goodness. Good. Hang on, I'm getting a gallery view here. So thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, John. It's just been a pleasure to work with you, and been an absolute pleasure listening to your presentation. And I've taken up a lot of time talking, so I'm going to turn it over to everybody else. So if you want to ask a question, I think what she's encouraging us to do is engage in a discussion, a conversation. So let's take advantage of that. Okay.
Shall I start?
Yes, Diane. Yes, of course.
Of course you shall, Diane.
Well, one of the, before I ask the question, I already put it in the chat box. One of the things I noticed is hands. You really focused a lot on hands, and I can't believe this series of photos. I've never seen hands so expressive. Like they're almost humans themselves. I don't know, you don't even need someone's face. I can tell how they're feeling. So I don't know how you did that, but that is just a remarkable skill that you've had for, I guess, the decisive moment in that conversation. So yeah, so I guess my question is, were you able to capture for yourself at the time of taking the photos clues to what the subject was thinking or chanting or singing? Because I'm wondering if that could give you a glimpse into what moved you to take that photo. And then as you create a series and go to maybe different, Buddhist temples, that could be almost the moment in a ceremony or something that you could try and pay attention to it and see if there are differences in different cultures. for that decisive moment. Does that make sense?
A whole lot, Diana. A great question, one I haven't been asked before. So one of the things I alluded to is the fact that I'm immersed in these places. And as an example, in Myanmar, it was a 9.5-hour bus ride to a remote retreat on the side of a mountain in a forest. And I was living there, and 1,000 monks and nuns there, complete silence almost the whole time, 8.5 hours of meditating. And in that environment, I was also given instructions not to photograph very much. So I was taking maybe one photograph, maybe 3 in an hour. The rest of the time, I was just observing and immersed. So I may even be sitting and meditating myself during part of the experience and trying to just absorb what is there, and also going back over and over again and trying to listen and learn from the people of the significance of everything that they were doing, and do a whole lot of observing, a whole lot of listening, and very little talking. So, and then something has to, I have to be attracted to it emotionally. Nothing's mechanical. Everything has to have the emotion to it. If the light's not there, I'm not taking the photograph. If it's not the right moment, or if it's intrusive in any way, I am not going to take the photograph. I try extremely hard to be as respectful as possible. Now, sometimes I'll be in a situation I got to go click, click, because but I've already figured out pretty much, because I know where the light's coming from, because I've been in the same room the day before at that time of day. I know where the monks or the nuns are going to be processioning in from, where they're coming from, which part of the temple they're going to be going to, what they're going to be doing next. I know all that ahead of time. So that really helps me quite a bit.
So maybe, I'll let other people ask questions, but I'm just wondering, so I guess I can't remember who said it, but it's almost like maybe you're also projecting yourself into the photos as well, right? Because you're waiting for the decisive moment that you like, in I guess the ceremony, that you can reflect in yourself. So anyways, you've given a lot to think about, and yes, you've given me some inner peace today. Thank you. Those are beautiful images. Thanks.
Hi, John. This is Suku. How are you?
Great to see you.
Good to see you too. I enjoyed your presentation, and I had a couple of questions. Since you've been doing this for past, how many, 10 years now?
I've been started in Vietnam in 1998.
Okay, so
the
it's more
series
than
started, probably the images are back to 2008 or so.
great. How has it changed you personally? One. Number two is, has it changed the way you approach photography?
Perfect. As immersed as I've been, and how appreciative as I've been of being in these areas, it's clearly changed me. It's really helped me be able to step back and be less judgmental, more realistic, maybe listen a little better, maybe be a little bit more observant, greater humility, hopefully, taking nothing for granted, a respect and an appreciation of the interconnectedness of all of us, and how much we rely on each other, and the importance of collective energy, rethinking of Western traditions, and an appreciation of other perspectives, whether it be in medicine and Eastern ways of approaching medicine, the cosmos and our interconnectedness, is exhibited by some experiments with quantum physics. So the list goes on and on of how I think it has, hopefully in a positive way, helped me, and I'm extremely appreciative.
Thank you.
And clearly, I think, and I hope it's been reflected in the way I approach my artwork and trying to get at deeper and deeper levels, which may or not be the case. Everyone, can judge for themselves. I don't know, no expectations that anything I'm doing is any different than anybody else. And one thing about I really learned from His Holiness, he just considers himself a simple monk. I don't. And I'm certainly nowhere near, the level of expertise that many of you have achieved in different things that you do, I'm sure. But yeah, we're kind of all in this together. That's kind of the way I look at it. And anything that we can all do collectively or individually to help with the common cause and the common good, I'm all for it, because I need all the help I can get. I have a lot of weaknesses. That, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
Any other thoughts?
Were you there when the Dalai Lama received the Congressional Medal of Honor?
No, I was not. I've had 3 or 4 private audiences with His Holiness, but they've all been in India,
There.
and a number of group times with him also, but they've not been in that kind of a setting. The reason I was with Madam Speaker and Nancy Pelosi and the others is that the Dalai Lama's representative coordinated it so that the mayor and I were there in India at the same time. This delegation of 8 or 9 members of Congress were there, and they coordinated so the members of Congress and the mayor and I spent the whole weekend together. So we had a lot of interactions, with the group. But that's been the closest. Well, no, I take that back. I've been at other gatherings in Washington, D.C. At the invitation of the Office of Tibet, when members of Congress were there, but His Holiness was in India.
Have you ever been to like the monastery in Frederick, Maryland, or do you see any of it locally? Have you ever photographed any of the local Tibetan
So great
community?
question. So I've just recently, we've just gotten a second home in Bethesda, Maryland, 8 months ago. So I haven't had a chance to explore there yet. In Raleigh, there's Fagitting Shan Temple, which is a different Buddhist order. And I had over many years a real relationship built with them. And because of that, I was invited to their North American headquarters in Los Angeles and given special permission, which is a whole other story, to photograph there. And then because they had been burned before by camera crews from Hollywood,
Right.
but because of the track record I had with the local Buddhist group, they allowed me to come and live there and photograph there. And then because I hate myself, I was invited to their world headquarters in Taiwan, where I again was with a small group and was able to photograph. So it really is important for me to develop those relationships. In fact, they were the ones that got permission for me to go to Myanmar to be at that retreat, because a nun from Japan had lived there for 13 years and knew the nun at the Raleigh temple, and they made the introduction. So it's just all this stuff. Oh, so what I was going to say is that to the Baltimore exhibition, the way that came about at the American Visionary Art Museum is that I was part of a Dalai Lama's delegation to an Erskine summit that was held in Aspen, Colorado, a few years back. So I was part of a 4-person delegation to go there. And when I went, I was stuck in the Denver airport trying to get to Aspen for a number of hours, waiting at the gate, and just happened to strike up a conversation with this woman that was sitting next to me who looked interesting. And it was Rebecca Hofberger, the American Visionary Art Museum.
Ah,
Hilarious.
And I had already committed to His Holiness to promote compassion worldwide. And I had come up with this idea of a traveling museum exhibition, a photography exhibition on compassion. So when she saw my work, we ended up sitting there talking. She ended up going to the Earth Call Summit. And when she heard about what I was doing and this idea about a compassion exhibition, she said, "Oh my God, we've got to talk more." So Rebecca and I ended up meeting multiple times. She decided she was going to put together this $500,000 exhibition at the American Visionary Art Museum with all kinds of art. Mine, it turned out, was the only photography, and she ran with it. And that's how the American Visionary Art Museum exhibition, Healing and the Art of Compassion, came about. Go figure.
Sandy,
that's
do
a
you
great
think you can,
story.
Sandy, do
Yeah.
you think you can unmute Camellia?
I'm trying and I can't. Yeah, it's not something that's easy to do, and I've tried.
Okay. So maybe you can read her chat.
Yes, okay,
Maybe
yes.
if she drops off and comes back on.
So for Camilla, let me read what she put in, John, what she put in. We won't worry about the technology here. Oh, I see, it's on her end, it's her mouse. Anyway, she asked, "I just wanted to reflect that this opportunity to immerse oneself in observing these images is even more meaningful or significant given the collective experience of COVID, reflecting on the opportunities that time alone or with one's immediate family can open for self-reflection."
Mhm. Yeah. And it's interesting you bring that up, because one of the things that's important to me with my artwork anyway, and other people may not see it that way, but I don't do my art. First of all, none of my artwork is because it's going to sell. It has to touch me. That's number one. Number two, I don't want it, hopefully, to be something where someone just puts it on their wall and doesn't come back to it. So the imagery that I try to capture, the emotions that I try to capture, hopefully are things that people can come back to time after time. So the book, as an example, is not about flipping through the photographs. It's about coming back to it over and over again, reading some of the things, reading some of the poetry, coming back again, just like your artwork. When you're working on a project, your first images kind of get you started. They kind of jumpstart the process. But the more I find that I immerse myself in the imagery and think about it, then when I go back, the next set of photographs maybe is even a little bit more powerful. And that's what the process I've found has worked for me over and over again. It's interesting that the photographs, I had it was a 3-person exhibition up in Maine that just closed a couple of months ago. And one of the people that came to it is working on a project with major cancer research centers all around the country. And he ended up purchasing, like, God knows how many of the books, and ended up giving them as gifts to the researchers at those cancer institutions around the country. Because he felt there was a connection between their work and what I'm trying to communicate through the imagery. He went even a step further and has started purchasing the large images, Palladium Prints, to start with, the large ones, the largest I can make, and framing them and giving them as gifts to the cancer centers. And they're hanging at like the what's it called, in the one in Boston, the big one. I'm blanking.
Sydney
Sloan
Kimmel?
Kettering?
What's that? the Freiburg.
Oh, Boston. Okay.
And Dana,
I was saying Slim
Dana,
Kettering.
Dana Farber.
Yeah, so it's in the nurtured image, which is the one on the front cover of the book of the boy with another monk on top of hand on top of his head and whatnot. That's in the waiting room now at their cancer center. And he just purchased another one that's going into another major cancer center. There's a hospice in Raleigh, and they built this multi-million-dollar hospice center. And they ended up buying like 5 images from an earlier series. And they went and wanted to show me where the photographs were. They weren't where the patients were. They were in the administrative area for the staff, because the staff needed it. The staff needed it. So again, there are different ways that you can touch people that you have absolutely no idea. And that's what I'm trying to do through the photographs. And I hope, maybe that's kind of what's coming across to some people. So I really appreciate, Camilla, your comments there, and I'm open to other ones that you may have, or conversations after all this wraps up.
well, in addition to the incredible, mind-blowing images, I'm kind of a hands guy myself, but musicians. I lost count of the times you said that's another story. And, and I'm fascinated, hope you are, by the idea of somehow telling those stories either through images or through a journal or an autobiography or in some fashion. I think that would be an interesting addition to all of your other material.
Yeah. Well, thanks. If I didn't struggle so much with the English language, then, which I think Sandra was talking about at the beginning, writing is not one of my skills. That's why I say we all have our different ways of helping each other. So that's why one of the reasons I got a poet to write poetry to help express the images. And both Lance and Paula were just pulling stories out of me over like a year and a half, saying, God, John, you've got to tell these stories. I said, I'll be happy to share them with you orally if you want to take some notes and then help me write these things down. But it's agony for me to write. I'm just not a writer.
I hear that kids these days, they just love watching it on YouTube, TikTok. You should just start doing
Telling the stories on
daily
TikTok.
affirmations with John 365.
Go figure. Well, one thing is that 60% of people are visual learners.
Wow.
And I remember, like in medical school, they came back a few years later and said, talking about upgrading their curriculum, the first thing I said to them is, you got to remember that most people are visual learners. The only way I survived medical school was that one of my classmates was really good at taking notes, and she made money by transcribing everything and then selling it to all of us. Otherwise, I never would have made it through medical school.
So I'd love to explore a little bit more. You're saying that you're an artist, but you're also a teacher, right? And so kind of your thoughts on how you have used, or maybe you can use, these images for teaching. And I know actually the thing with the hand, you told us that you do surgery on the hand to the elbow, right? So you know a lot about hands, and having just broken my wrist, and I'm going through hand therapy myself right now. I'm so happy I have use of my hand again. You don't know how much you really use your hand every day. The whole thing that you were saying about being grateful what you have and whatnot. And the fact that your images, I think that's great to use it in cancer centers. It's really funny. I work at a nonprofit that funds research for curing Alzheimer's disease. And one of the big sessions with the government I was on, someone was saying, okay, we need to get the patient voice in this. We need more compassion in the process. So there's that word compassion again. So do you maybe just elaborate on more of your merging of art and medical education, I guess?
Sure, sure. Well, as I said, from the beginning, that each body of work that I have has something to do in one way or another with health and wellness. And that's regardless of what group it might be. So as an example, there are caregivers that benefit just as much from some of these topics as others. There's life balance, which is what I've been talking about for decades now, for all different kinds of groups. There are interfaith groups talking about compassion and compassion for self, compassion for others. Life, how do we do that? How do we find life balance? How do we navigate through the world? And then I use the artwork as a springboard for that conversation. So since people are visual, presentations are each tailored to the group, regardless of whether it's a photography group or a medical group, whether it's a group of attorneys, whether it doesn't matter the group, whether it's people that are home care providers, whether that's mothers, whether that's cancer survivors, it doesn't matter. These are all universal concepts, and we all have the basic same fundamental needs, and it's just a matter of tailoring it to the group.
I think also at medical schools for healthcare professionals, training them too.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I would love to give presentations to incoming freshman medical school classes, incoming residency programs, all different ones. If people in this group have other groups of any sort that you think might be interested, I do this all the time. I give presentations to 2,000 people, or in person, or smaller groups. And again, as I said, I don't charge for any of it. If I have to fly somewhere, sure, I'd like someone to help pay for the cost, but otherwise. So again, if you all have groups, again, museums that might be interested in the Shades of Compassion Traveling Museum exhibition. We're trying to keep the cost for the museums extremely low. And it's, again, other opportunities for education.
Do you?
Yes, Sam. Oh, I'm Ola. Did you?
Yes,
No, go ahead, Ola. And then Sam, you can ask your question, okay? Or make your comment. All right, Ola.
Thank you. So do you leave some of your photographs in the countries where you take photos, in some institutions where perhaps you did some work?
I'd be more than happy to if asked. It would just depend on what the circumstances are. So I'm still doing international exhibitions. COVID has put a real, so right now everything's on hold and everything's backed up. But I work with all kinds of people and all kinds of groups. And I mean, I'm on the phone with WhatsApp like almost every day with someone here, there, or whatever. One of the great things about working on the book with Tanus and everyone else and also the traveling exhibition is that even though people are all over the world working on all these things, we're all able to do it now with Zoom pretty easily. So I'm, for better or for worse, interconnected all the time internationally and in the US, and doing presentations for photography groups all over the country.
Right.
Don, I noticed on your website that you had several albums, if you will, of what I would call abstract images.
Hmm.
How does that fit into, or does it fit into the kind of stuff you're presenting tonight?
Well, that's a great question. One of the things I was talking about at the beginning was going with your instincts and your nature and what excites you, and not doing things just because it's going to sell, or it's because what everybody's seen from you before. So if anyone goes to my website, you'll see that each of the 6 particular bodies of work that I happen to have on there now, your initial impression is that they're each entirely different. But if you then read about what the series is about, the underlying themes are somewhat interconnected. And also tends to be a style that people say I have. I don't really even think about it, but I try to get in more close, and the focus and the energy and the emotion. And it's even if some of them are abstract, you still know what it is that you're looking at. The feather series is an example. They're abstract photographs of feathers, but there's nothing distracting you from looking at what it is that I'm trying to draw your attention to. It's the same with medicine. When I'm photographing for teaching there, let's say in the operating room, I've got to be extremely strategic because it's a sterile field. I only have a very few opportunities to put on some extra gloves, pull my camera out. I've got to make sure the exposure is going to be right. I can't slow down the procedure. So I've got to know when during the process I'm going to stop to pull out my camera. Just like if I'm in a monastery and a ceremony is going on, I've got to know when to pull out the camera and when to get to a particular vantage point in order to communicate what it is that I'm trying to convey. So the skill sets are the same, regardless of whether I'm photographing a feather or whether I'm in a monastery photographing someone's hand, or if I'm in a medical setting. The skill sets are the same.
John, I had a question, technical question, if you have a minute. I heard you talked about rolled up some of the prints or for a gallery in India. And I was just wondering, was it canvas prints or?
Sure. So the prints are, first of all, I can only roll them to about a diameter of about 8-inch diameter is the smallest. So Palladium prints go on 100% cotton paper. And so I speak with the people that create the paper and that sell the paper. Bostic and Sullivan, I don't know if people know them. They're one of the ones that sell the paper, and you can get it down to about 6 inches, but I like to be on the safe side. It's more 8 inches. So you can get that paper and you can roll it that tightly to 8 inches, and it won't hurt the paper. And Palladium doesn't scuff easily. The Palladium prints, you can bring your fingernail, you don't have to, if you don't do it hard, across it, and it doesn't scuff easily. Okay. Also, it's archival to about 1,000 years. So assuming you don't put it in direct sunlight, it's also going to be fine on your wall. So those are some of the other reasons that I use Palladium, and I can roll it in the tube, and then I roll another one on top of that, another print on top of that, another one on top of that, so I make a bigger ball, so to speak. And the wood that's in the bottom is a dowel rod that's round, and it goes in a sleeve so it can be pulled out. And the piece of wood at the top is cut with a slit in the top so that the thickness of my cloth can fit up there. And then I wedge it from the backside with a wedge-shaped piece of wood. I stick that up there to hold it temporarily. So when I'm rolling the cloth, it's cloth on top of cloth on top of cloth. And then the wood gets slid inside the tube.
Okay. So how do you attach the Palladium print to the cloth?
I'm sorry?
How do you attach the Palladium print to the cloth?
Okay. So I learned from Japanese printers how you make a Japanese scroll. So that's how I learned how to do the ones that I do, that were the ones used in India. And then for the Tonka painting ones, those were sewn in by the Tonka painter. I could never. And so that's in Bhutan, and I have to get work over to Bhutan in order for them to then incorporate them into a Tonka painting. And then through my friends in Bhutan, I'm able to get them back to the United States.
Oh, thanks.
But are you having them printed on that paper?
I do all myself.
Okay.
I do the Palladium prints in my dark room here in the United States. I have a large UV light box, but I can only get up to about a size 14 by 21 on mine. So that's the largest I can print as a Palladium print. So Rebecca at the American Visionary Art Museum wanted larger prints.
Right.
So the only way I could do them larger was to do a digital print. So I used a printer in Colorado who specializes in really high-end digital prints on Hahnemühle photo rag paper. So we're actually getting ready to put together the traveling museum exhibition, and it's all going to be printed at this printing company. We're doing 50 images, all framed the same way. So yeah.
Thank you.
That has to be plexiglass.
Sorry, no, go ahead. Was there someone who hasn't said anything yet?
Go ahead, Ola.
It just sounds like photography is your the center of your life these days. Would that be correct?
Well, so I decided I stopped doing medical work in the United States 11 years ago. And because I didn't have enough time to do the international medical work. So I continued on the international medical work. Then in 2017, after committing to His Holiness, I decided my last medical trip was going to be to Cambodia in 2018. So for the last number of years, I've been working very closely with the Dalai Lama's representatives on a number of different compassion-related projects. So, and we formed the Shades of Compassion Foundation also. So we started doing a lot of national and international compassion-related projects. The ones that I've been working on are all been art-related in one shape or another. So I started the organization for a summit of museum professionals from North America to go over to India for a summit and a private audience with the Dalai Lama. So again, to promote compassion world throughout North America. So that was another one that we did like 2017, 2018. We did a documentary honoring His Holiness that we had 3 US presidents participated in the documentary of His Holiness to commemorate his 85th birthday. The traveling museum exhibition, the book. So it's been full time, yeah.
Thank you. And you're enjoying it, which is great.
I had one more question, then I'm let you go. Are you planning to branch your photography in another direction or just stick with?
Well, Sandy's going to laugh at that question, because for the last year, a little more than a year, starting after January 6th, I started a new project called Perceived Realities, which is a little more edgy, let's say. And I started wanting to understand and document through photographs what I see in Eastern North Carolina, whereas the other place where I've been spending my time, and also just speaking with some folks with different perspectives than I'm used to. I'll leave it at that. So I'm not sure actually where I'm going with it. I've actually done some presentations with some open-minded churches and with some groups, and using the images as a springboard for conversation. I've done another one with a compassion group internationally. I just took some more photographs 4 days ago for that series. So we'll see where it's going to go.
Okay, good luck.
Is that where your title pictures came in? Your title pool pictures? Is that where your title pool? What about the title pool and the feather pictures?
So they've been years ago. The feather series that was exhibited, the last exhibition was about 3 years ago, I think. Yeah. The tide pool series was one of my earliest series. And it's all about our perception of things, looking at things from different points of view. That's been extremely, that's the one that the hospice center purchased, like 5 pictures. That was like 10 years, 12 years ago.
Wow. They're lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, and one other thing. So the Feather series, one of the reasons I did that series was that there were times when I couldn't do my international traveling. So I couldn't be working or even traveling in the United States. And I wanted to be still stimulated and doing something. So those photographs were all shot in a closet. Yeah, but it spoke to me. So I decided to do that series. So that's a whole other story.
Yeah, they're really fun. Really
All
fun.
right. Anybody else want to make a comment or a question? So I want to sort of close by reading something. Errol, you put something very poignant in the chat. Do you want me to read it or you want to say it? Okay. All right. Well, I'm just going to read, yeah. So Errol said, this is such a wonderful presentation, more than just photos, but also deep sentiment carried by your photos and the unique experience you have been able to share. And I think he just said it so well. Yeah, just with much gratitude, I want to express for the group, on behalf of the group, for such an incredibly moving, enlightening, educational experience. And I just want to say, one thing I found, it was storytelling, John. You are an exceptional storyteller. I was just sort of like, just sort of engaged in it with you. And thank you.
Well, I mean, thank you for putting it together, and it's really great. I mean, I really enjoy this opportunity to interact with people, and I really appreciated the comments and some of the really well thought out questions. Not that I had all answers to them, but it's just been a real pleasure, and hopefully, maybe at some point we'll cross paths again. As I said, I'm open to other opportunities to interact with people, and thanks again for sticking with us here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yes.